Four young people, after watching a movie, brutally tortured their friend to death. The level of their cruelty was so shocking that it completely overturned all conventional notions. So, why did this happen? Why would people who were supposed to be friends treat their victims so mercilessly? Hello everyone, this is the Unsolved Mysterious Cases channel. I'm Michael Vincent. Today I will tell you the story of the Michael Moss case. On November 13th, 1999, an event occurred in Liverpool, England. At the time, Michael Moss was a young man living there. Since childhood, he wasn't particularly good at academics, but he had a special talent for mechanics. His mother recalls a time when he was young and took apart his bicycle and put it back together again. As he grew older, Michael became passionate about motorcycles and developed a strong enthusiasm for them. Additionally, Michael had a close relationship with his father. However, when he was 11 years old, his father tragically suffered a brain hemorrhage and had to be hospitalized. Although his condition improved, the brain damage caused significant changes in his personality. From being known as a kind person, he became irritable. When Michael and his mother visited him in the hospital, he would frequently get angry, curse at his wife and son, and even spit at them. This drastic change, coupled with his father's deteriorating condition, deeply affected Michael during his childhood. After his father passed away from the brain hemorrhage, this loss began to alter Michael's behavior. His father's death had a profound impact on his mental health. At school, he became uncontrollable and was eventually expelled. Michael was sent to a school for troubled children called Pinewood, specifically designed for kids with special educational and behavioral needs. However, Michael's behavioral issues remained severe. His mother, Liz, was grieving the loss of her husband and now had to face the challenge of managing Michael's behavior. Social workers suggested sending Michael to a children's home so he could rest. In 1999, Michael moved into this children's home. It was a place that allowed freedom of movement, including visiting his mother or going out at night. Life here was relatively good, but there were two teenagers, Alan Bentley and Mark McCaffrey, who had been expelled from school earlier for seriously injuring another student. They too had been sent to this support facility. Though they were school bullies, they had no criminal records and had never committed crimes outside of school. However, they continued bullying other students at the facility. Michael decided to keep his distance, but he maintained a friendly relationship with them. Later, another student named Graham Nelly joined the unit and quickly became friends with Alan and Mark. Alan had a girlfriend, but in October 1999, she broke up with him and started dating Michael. This made Alan furious. He often told his friends that he wanted to smash Michael's head and kill him. However, Alan didn't act immediately, but quietly plotted his revenge. On November 12, 1999, Alan invited a few friends over to his house to celebrate his birthday. These friends included Mark McCaffrey, Graham Nelly, and another named Neil Breslin. The four of them watched the movie Inglourious Basterds, drank a bottle of vodka and some apple cider, and got pretty drunk. While drinking, Alan mentioned his ex-girlfriend and Michael, and as usual, he started saying that what he wanted most was to kill Michael for taking his girlfriend. As they drank more, Alan came up with a plan. Around 1 a.m. on November 13th, Mark called Michael, who was in his room at the children's home. Mark tried to lure Michael to meet him, arranging to meet at an alley in the suburbs of Liverpool, with plans to go to the park. However, the people waiting for Michael weren't just Mark, but also Alan, Mark, and Neil Breslin. The four of them went to a nearby park where Alan began attacking Michael, hitting him in the head and knocking him to the ground. Then, they continued to punch and kick his head. Neil Breslin left the scene during the attack, but Mark and Alan stripped Michael of all his clothes and threw him into a puddle. At this point, Alan, who was also naked, began kicking Michael repeatedly and used a broken piece of glass to cut into his legs. It was believed that the attack was a form of revenge for Michael, dating Alan's ex-girlfriend, and it went on for a while. After the brutal beating, the three of them returned home while Graham Nelly stood guard outside Alan's house during the first attack. Soon after, the three decided that their revenge on Michael wasn't finished and went back to the park. Although Neil didn't participate, Mark, Alan, and Graham went. They found Michael still lying on the ground, badly injured and in need of medical attention. But instead of helping him, they launched another savage attack. Mark screamed at Michael, demanding that he get up immediately, or he would smash his face in. Although Michael tried to stand, he collapsed again from the severe beating. At this point, the three began kicking and using a broken bottle to slash at Michael's body, holding his head down and taking turns kicking him in the face, even joking that they were using his head as a soccer ball. Alan picked up a shard of glass and began cutting into Michael's back, trying to recreate a scene he had seen in the movie Sin City. Although Michael's ear wasn't severed, the attack lasted nearly 2 hours, and the attackers later stated that in the last 10 minutes, Michael had stopped moving or making any sound. The three of them left the scene at 3:31 a.m. Mark McCaffrey made an anonymous call to emergency services, reporting that a body had been found and providing the location. Emergency personnel arrived at the scene, but while they said they didn't find anyone, they observed the site and left at 7:30 a.m. on November 13th. A nearby dog walker discovered Michael's body and quickly alerted the police, drawing attention to the incident. Investigators attempted to identify Michael and investigate the care facility where he lived, as the location of the body was not far from there. The last record of Michael was leaving the care facility, but never returning, and the description of the body matched his. Police compared Michael's photos with the body to identify him, but due to the severe disfigurement of his face, they initially thought it might not be him. However, staff from the care facility arrived at the scene and confirmed that the body was indeed Michael's. At the same time, Michael's mother, Liz, was at home listening to the radio when she noticed a police car parked outside. The police broke the shocking news that Michael had been murdered in a horrific attack. Soon after, Graham and his mother turned themselves in. Graham said he deeply regretted what had happened to Michael and pointed to Alan Bentley, Neil Breslin, and Mark McCaffrey as being involved. Although Graham truly seemed remorseful and answered all questions, Mark and Alan denied the murder charges, meaning more evidence was needed to convict them. This led to Michael's body undergoing 5 autopsies, which deeply affected Liz. While the 4 were being held in custody, police searched Alan's house and found a comic book he had drawn that detailed the murder process. The autopsy results showed that Michael suffered severe injuries. His cheekbones were completely shattered, his nose and facial bones were detached, his eye sockets were broken, 10 ribs and his neck were fractured, and there were 48 stab wounds and 50 bruises on his body. Although the stab wounds were not fatal, they caused significant blood loss, which led to Michael's death during the second attack. The attackers continued to stomp on and stab his body after he had died. Police found the broken bottle and shards of glass used to attack Michael at the scene, along with fingerprints from Alan, Mark, and Graham. Additionally, the police had enough other evidence to charge Alan, Mark, and Graham with murder. The trial began in July 2000. Neil was not charged with murder due to his involvement in the first attack and his willingness to admit his role. Because he did not participate in the second attack, he was not convicted of murder. The perpetrators attempted to unjustifiably justify their actions, claiming that Michael had asked them to beat him in order to demand compensation for his injuries and share the money. However, this accusation was deemed entirely fabricated, and the criminal evidence against the 3 was very clear. Mark, Alan, and Graham were all convicted. During the trial, Graham showed remorse, while Mark and Alan did not. Mark and Alan were sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Graham received 9 years. All 3 were later released, but it is unclear whether they were ever arrested again for other offenses. Notably, in another case, Neil Breslin was sent to prison for a different crime. At that time, Neil and his associates attempted to rob a family at night with a knife. The family consisted of 80-year-old Winifred and her 82-year-old husband. Their son was also there, sleeping on the sofa. Neil and his associates broke in, using the knife to threaten their son and demanding he remove his jewelry. Although Winifred refused, she went into the kitchen and grabbed a 15-inch meat cleaver. According to reports, Winifred told Neil, who was holding a 10-inch knife, "You call that a knife?" and pointed it at his stomach. Neil and his associates fled the scene. For this crime, Neil was convicted in 2006. After being released from prison, he was later convicted again for breaking a window at his girlfriend's house. The death of Michael Moss is referred to as the Reservoir Dogs Massacre because the movie Reservoir Dogs influenced the attack. However, it is important to note that there is no direct link between violent films and criminal behavior, even though this movie inspired some individuals to commit violent acts. After the incident, Michael's mother, Liz, still had 2 other children and is now a grandmother. She has expressed that she hopes one day to be reunited with her son. So, what do you think? Can movies truly influence ordinary people to turn to crime? Please leave a comment, Michael Vincent would love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next episode.